Okay, Kailash, wrestling done. Let's move on to Kabaddi.
Yes.
Economies of Khel. Episode 2. Kabaddi, Kabaddi, Kabaddi.
So, my memory of Kabaddi is watching this old Bollywood film called Naseeb, which has Rishi Kapoor and Kim. And there's a song where I think Rishi Kapoor is trying to woo or trying to impress Kim, and they're playing Kabaddi. It's fascinating because, it's girls versus boys. And the song lyrics are literally hutu tu tu tu. Pakro, pakro, pakro. And it's kind of creepy because this man wants to grab this woman. But because it's Kabaddi, it kind of seems endearing. And, Rishi Kapoor is wearing shorts and he's just scrawny. And, just the memory of this song comes back the moment you mentioned Kabaddi.
I think I was in maybe third standard. I think it's third standard Karnataka State Board school. And in the Kannada textbook, there was a lesson on Kabaddi. And I think that was my introduction to Kabaddi. And the interesting line that I remember is they had written about how this is a sport, how it's played, and you have to keep chanting Kabaddi, Kabaddi, Kabaddi. But the line after that said, Kabaddi badlu nivanu elaniru gadagada, elaniru gadagada, athwa chudugudu, chudugudu, chudugudu. You could actually say these words also. And I think that's what caught my attention. After that, fast forward about 20 plus years, and then it's in a stadium, fancy lights and neon. That transformation, I think, is incredible. Did you ever play Kabaddi in school?
No, so I've not only have I never played Kabaddi in school, I've actually never seen Kabaddi in front of me. So it's a sport which has completely been introduced to me through either watching in television or in different ways. In like it's turned up in movies or it's turned up as an ad. And I really wanted to say that for me, Kabaddi has entered the national consciousness because, when we were young, the Cricket World Cup was probably the biggest thing after a release of a Shah Rukh Khan movie. Mm-hmm. And there's a match going on between India and Australia on a Sunday. And India is chasing a thrilling match. But at the same time, there's Asiad game going on. And the Kabaddi Asiad final is going on. And there are as many people interested in that as it's in the cricket match. In fact, you were telling me that there was this interesting thing that happened in the Kabaddi final match.
Oh, yeah, this reminds me. Actually, I'll tell you another story. I'll come back to the India-Iran match. But this is when I was studying in the US. I had taken a course on sports and economics and all of that. And we were asked to do a paper on a sport which we thought was, booming and things like that. So everybody had different sports which they were putting forth. And I was the only Indian in that class. So I thought, okay, something, I'm going to choose something which none of the others will know. And I chose Kabaddi. And I go to class and I know I'm going to, really thrill all these white kids with my story of Kabaddi and, this very exotic sport which I'm going to present. And I start talking and I had an Iranian classmate who was like, hey, Kabaddi, I know it. And I was like, I thought I would be the one who would...
What would bring an Indian and Iranian together?
Yeah. And only then did I come to know that Iran was active in Kabaddi. And like this Sunday, there was this really intense match between India and Iran. Interestingly, because in the previous matchup in the Asian Games, I think 2018, Iran won gold and India lost. So this was like everybody was looking forward for this match. And at the last moment, there was some dispute about which rule to follow.
And there's two versions of the rule. One that's been adopted now, which is even if you did and you headed out in the lobbies, it doesn't matter. And the raid is done as soon as you've stepped out into the lobby.
Even the umpires were discussing and the players were very heated. The coaches were, shouting. Some of the players just sat on the mat.
1-1 is the call. Pavan says how?
One of the reasons this is happening is that there is lack of clarity among the officials as well. Giving out his ruling, or is it a negotiation at a vegetable market? What's happening here?
It's ridiculous.
So much drama happened. And then the final few seconds were played out and finally India won.
Or will it? Yes, it has. The gold will go to India. The men's Kabaddi gold for the
A lot
Indian
of discussion is still happening as to whether what rule had to be followed and everything. But we did win gold, which was really exciting to see because, these are the kind of things if what is that method where you decide in cricket, Duckworth-Lewis methods and stuff, where there is so much discussion of, oh, they should have followed that. No, if they had done this would happen. People are talking like that, right? So you have a sport like Kabaddi now being discussed similar to an outcome of cricket. And I think that is huge. That's really huge.
So Kailash, can I just take a quick segue here and say that, how old is Kabaddi?
Yeah, how old
and
is
why
it?
does India care about Kabaddi? And I came across a fascinatingly unorganized history of Kabaddi.
Okay.
So I'll give you a really quick summary of what
let's
about
go.
Kabaddi. So the first most interesting thing I found was that there was a tweet by Amitabh Bachchan.
Wow.
Right after Pro Kabaddi League. And Amitabh Bachchan says that Kabaddi is ancient sport in India.
तुम कहना क्या चाहता है?
And Arjun used to be trained by Krishna by playing Kabaddi. And then the fascinating story, which is unproven because I couldn't find any link.
क्या कहना चाहता है तुम?
He says that Kabaddi simulates what happened to Abhimanyu, which is he goes into a Chakravyuh and gets surrounded. And the fundamental idea is that how do you get out when you're surrounded? And
Parampara Anushasan.
yeah, and you know what? When you watch Kabaddi, to my mind, you know what comes? I think of Amitabh Bachchan Diwar.
तुम लोग मुझे ढूंढ रहे हो और मैं तुम्हारा यहाँ इंतजार कर रहा हूँ.
And Amitabh Bachchan enters a room and there are like 10 guys standing around. And you would think the person would like get really scared. So he would turn around and run. Amitabh Bachchan turns around, locks the door, puts a lock in it, and looks out, and it's exactly like the raider going in. Because you're surrounded, you're overpowered.
Oh, yes.
And I was thinking, the iconic thing about Kabaddi which stands out is, if you look at other sports, like in cricket, like a fast bowler bowling against a best batsman, one-on-one. In football, a fast attacker going against a big defender. In something like boxing or wrestling, like two big guys going. Kabaddi is the only sport where there's one guy against 10 guys. It seems unfair.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the thrill of seeing such an underdog to try and go. And you can think palpably the fear you feel when you have like these big guys all around you, all waiting to together pounce.
Yeah, and in a confined space.
And the thrill of seeing one person sort of pull off against so many people. And I feel like that's sort of the real excitement about Kabaddi that stands out.
Oh yeah, I think because every raid then is like a David Goliath story. Like you're going against something which is normally not possible, but you still can come out of it. Because I think also as Indians, we love an underdog story.
Yeah.
We want the underdog to win, and Kabaddi gives it every time. Every time someone raids, you're like, okay, I want the single person who's there to win against the 10.
So, Kailash, probably the worst moment for all sports fan, which is when the COVID lockdown happens. And suddenly overnight, there's no live sports.
Yeah.
And for you and me, it's sort of our lifeblood is sports. And every day you come back home and you just, whatever sports is going to put on, suddenly it's just blanket, stopped. At that point, I remember you told me that you watched something, sort of documentary on Kabaddi players. And that sort of was the first time you started paying attention to, whoa, this is something interesting and different happening over here.
Yeah, so this was called Beyond the Mat. It was part of the Pro Kabaddi franchisee. But what interested me the most was, here was a time where, think about it, Pro Kabaddi has all these players who are not playing, which means they're not able to, show the world what is happening. How do you still stay connected with the fans? What are you going to do? And especially for a new league like Kabaddi, which was started in like 2014, you have only about 5-6 seasons to show the repetition, the highlights and everything. Unlike cricket, which has about 40-50 years of background. So I think Beyond the Mat was very interesting because this was a way to engage the athletes, but not for their usual activity of playing. This was about knowing the athletes. So I think it was a really good way of connecting the fans and the players.
Hello. Welcome to Beyond the Mat.
अगर आप कबड्डी प्लेयर नहीं बनते तो आप क्या बनते?
आर्मी में मैं एक मोटर मैकेनिक होता.
सबसे टफेस्ट डिफेंडर आपने?
सुंदर नाडा, जोगिंदर नरवाल.
So, I remember what really caught my attention was you told me that there were these players being interviewed and behind them it was a proper like a village with agriculture and khet and cows and animals. And in the middle of this, it's kind of surreal because, we are used to seeing sportsmen wearing sporting kit and walking in the field or in the action. This is completely in a different arena. You see the sportsmen.
Remember, this was the same time when David Warner was putting up Instagram reels, dancing to Bollywood numbers with his kids, right? And he was it looks like he was in either a fancy hotel or a fancy apartment. and he was still interacting with the fans on Instagram. But on this side, you had Kabaddi players who were sitting, and you can very clearly make out from the background that they came from very humble beginnings. So a very, very modest house, with like a showcase with a few medals hanging. They had actually come from those modest beginnings to Pro Kabaddi League, which is like a sports league like any other, right? And that transformation and the conversations which were happening, although the questions were very predictable, the answers also told you the aspirations that the athletes themselves had and how they saw the league and what it's for. That was, I think, very interesting.
So Kailash, today I thought that we can think a little bit about this. There have been so many leagues in India. And, I remember that point in 2014 where every sport was trying to come up with a league. And there was a hockey league and a volleyball league and a badminton league, a basketball league. And in the midst of this, Pro Kabaddi League turns up. Mm-hmm. And, when it turned up, nobody would know what it would become. And, now a decade later, it's the second most viewed sport in India after cricket. So I thought today we can talk about and think about why is Kabaddi successful or why is the Pro Kabaddi League successful?
Yes. Let's just look at the sport of Kabaddi. If you break it down to its bare minimum, what do you have? You have a rectangular pitch or a court or whatever you call it. It's divided into half. One half belongs to one team, the other half belongs to the other. One person from this half has to just go to the other side, touch another player and come back. That's it. If you make sure you touch everyone and send them out, you win. There isn't any more complication than this. It is pretty much like you play tag, but within confined boundaries. That's it. And I think that's the beauty of it. Yes, there might be really complicated moves within it, but at the soul of it, it's like, can I go into the other's territory and just touch someone and then be back? And I think that really captures everybody's attention.
And what I really love about it is there's no fancy shoes, no fancy ball, no special equipment, no special training is required. It's just simply your hands and legs are all you have to survive, and your breath, which I think is a very important part of Kabaddi.
I think after swimming, I think Kabaddi is where lungs are really important because you are physically moving yet holding your breath and chanting. So that is a rare kind of athleticism, which you can't stand at the corner and go.
It's almost meditative, no?
Yeah, it is. It's like meditation on the move. But you
and it's
have
like you have one last breath left. In the last breath, what can you do? It's like the last stand.
It's almost like survival. You're going into the other's territory, but you only have one breath. So I think that's where the excitement also goes up, right? And the whole plot is you also don't need any special equipment like you said, but even all you need is field. Clay is fine, mat is fine, wood is fine. You can play it on pretty much any surface. But what I also find interesting is what primarily was seen as something which is played, in the quote-unquote rural areas, entire two cities of India, came onto TV and it was a banger. People loved it. And I think that is a transition which I find very interesting.
Jump, leap, catch, stretch, don't forget to
Two
catch your
points,
breath.
Telugu Titans.
Cracking game of Kabaddi.
सबका swag है तेवर में आग है ऐसी game की.
But it's the Pirates that win tonight. It's the Patna Pirates.
कबड्डी है.
And for me, a bit of the story of how Kabaddi becomes popular is the ability of the television to make people see what's going on from intimate closeness.
Right.
Kind of closeness that only the players can see. And it's kind of like a view of a sport which is not available to anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think with Pro Kabaddi League itself, I think that was a major transition that they looked at. So this was about 5-6 years after IPL had started, and IPL was a huge success. So like you said, volleyball leagues came, badminton came, tennis came. But then I think Charu Sharma had the brilliant idea. He looked at Kabaddi and he was like, wow.
So Kailash, can I step back? Who is this Charu Sharma and why is he so important to our story?
So Charu Sharma is important. People know Charu Sharma because he also used to come for cricket commentary and, he has been around the sports circle for a while. But Charu Sharma, I think his mind of making something for TV is really good with Pro Kabaddi, I think he showcased that the best. So Charu Sharma also, I think, partially owns Martial Sports, which owns Pro Kabaddi League. And he came up with the idea of, okay, can we move this sport, which has been around for a long time, and put it on to TV?
It began with 2006, the Asian Games at Doha, you might remember, in Qatar. And I was called upon to do the world feed commentary for Kabaddi. And I actually said yes. And I said, oh, I've said yes, but now, ab to seekhna bhi padega. And then, to, a couple of small stories. At the Asian Games in Doha, the first game to sell out, 3 months before the Asian Games, was Kabaddi. So that was a revelation. But the intrinsic quality of the sport was what drew all of us into wanting to do something more. And that's when my story with the Amateur Kabaddi Federation of India started. I said, come on, you guys, you've done so well to bring it to the Asian Games. Can we now take it further? Because according to me, in our own land, in the land of Kabaddi's origin, birth, it's our heritage sport. But I did feel that the game somehow had not been given its due.
And so what Charu Sharma did was, first of all, he got Anand Mahindra interested. And we know Mahindra is interested in sports in general. He has dabbed in basketball. He got in touch with the NBA. He keeps doing sports. So
and this is Mahindra of the Mahindra company,
Mahindra
right?
of the Mahindra.
The owner of one of the largest producers of tractors in India.
Yeah, Mahindra is everywhere now. So they both got together.
A bunch of us got together. I got hold of Anand, and who, as we know, Anand Mahindra, very sort of India focused. And I said, can we please do something about the sport, because it deserves much, much more than it's getting at that point of time. That's how it all started. It took very long because we wanted to do it right.
The first thing what Charu Sharma also did was he wanted to move it to the mat, because he wanted...
And I guess this is complicated because, Kabaddi is so ingrained in rural imagination that you can't think of it outside the akhada.
Yeah.
And outside just the mud and outside, all the training that, athletes are doing. It's hard to visualize the sport outside of that.
Yeah, it is.
So this was essentially just taking it from that setup in agricultural rural life and sort of bringing it into the glitzy, urban, filmy landscape which IPL had created.
Oh, yes. And then they did follow a lot of this IPL's tactics. The first one obviously was changing of the mat, right? From the clay, they decided it's going to be on a mat. And the most interesting thing is they actually did a lot of screen tests and research and decided that the mat had to be a specific color of purple, because that is what attracted viewers onto the TV itself. So people would also watch it because of the aesthetic itself. So the decisions were taken at that level. Right. And the beauty of Kabaddi, like you said, was it was confined to a specific rectangle. So recording it and showing it on TV was easy. Unlike a sport like, for example, football, which is a huge field where the cameraman has to literally follow the ball constantly. Here, you set up a camera and it's capturing everything. And along with this, to ensure it's going to be big on TV, PKL did really good production itself. They had people from, I think, International Management Group, which is from UK, producing all of it. They had an Israeli company doing graphics. So they really put it out for television. And the most important thing, they got Star to partner.
If live sport is not on television, then it has very little chance of, going across to many, many more people in its physical form. There we were with Star India, being given the mantle of Star Sports as well. And luckily they were India focused. And all of a sudden an opportunity came up where they said yes, and television came on board, which was so important. And that, of course, was the big game changer.
And once Star TV was there, they introduced commentary in 5-6 languages. They were showing...
So I think this is probably one of the first sports which is successfully produced for very different language speakers. Cricket commentary has always been in English and Hindi. It's very recent that you have other languages. That Pro Kabaddi started.
Yeah.
With, I think, 5 languages or 6 languages?
5 languages. They started with 5 languages. And what is interesting is, for me, I can still watch cricket with English and Hindi commentary. I cannot watch cricket in Kannada commentary. I'm not just... it doesn't just fit. But Kabaddi I could watch. I could still watch. Cricket commentary in Kannada, I somehow it doesn't match, right? Because maybe I'm too used to listening to all the commentary in English and Hindi. But they did, ensure that there were 5 languages. They also had multiple channels showing all of these. And Star had that capability, right? Because Star has been in India for a long time. They have all the wherewithal to ensure that
they have a presence
happens.
across the nation.
So you have a sport which is exciting. You have a set of people who have transformed it to television with all the right masalas. And you have the best chef, which is Star TV. And what comes out is PKL. Really tasty, delicious sport for Indians to consume. Along with that, they had to make a few more changes. So Charu Sharma recognized that it was too fast for TV. So, for example, if a kabaddi game is happening, you have 18 cameras, producer is shifting from one camera to other and people are watching. Some of the defining characteristics of sports in general are things like a slow motion replay, an action replay, reaction
Commentary
of
explaining,
the commentary explanation, reaction of the spectators, an advertisement, which is most important for the economics of it. Where do you fit all of that in? So they had to tweak some rules to make Pro Kabaddi.
So this kabaddi is not the same as...
It's not.
I mean, like say Asia, the kabaddi.
Yeah, no, there are some changes which are there. So, and these changes are basically not major changes in the rules, but how things are done. So, for example, if you get out, if a player gets out, they can't directly go and sit in their box where other players are sitting. They have to take a round around the mat and then go sit. So you have some time there to show the replay, maybe show an ad or maybe show some reactions of...
and this is not done in other form of kabaddi.
This is very specifically for Pro Kabaddi. What is also interesting is they made the referee's role way more out there. So for example, if some scuttle is happening, the referee would jump in and detangle them and ask them to start over. So people would know, okay, a scrimmage has happened. The referee has jumped in and sorted it out. Now we will start over again. So I think for the people who are watching the sport, think of it as an American who switched on the TV and suddenly Kabaddi pops up, PKL pops up. For this person who has seen American football, baseball and basketball, the slow motions, the referee in their very specific uniform, two sets of people in specific uniforms, a mat, the sound, the commentary, all of these aesthetics ensure that they also know that they are watching a sport. They know it is sport. They recognize all the characteristics, but something is different.
In fact, Kailash, can I just say, the setup for kabaddi sounds a lot like our last episode about how wrestling looks.
Yeah.
In the arena with the sound and entrance musics and the action and the referee.
No, I think that is what the league formats in general look for. So in the league formats, if you take the common characteristics out, there'll be so many of these common characteristics. The novelty of each sport is only small. I think that's how it works, right? Because you want something which is comforting and comfortable. You don't want to you try hard to understand something, but you also want something new. How do you balance this out? And the sports league gives the perfect thing. So you recognize everything. What is only different? Some rules are different. The shape of the court is different. And I think that's the beauty of leagues in general.
Kabaddi, 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 kabaddi.
So a raid lasts for 30 seconds and the person going in for raid has to hold their breath for this whole 30 seconds round and keep chanting kabaddi.
Oh, wow. Do you think Shankar Mahadevan would have been a good kabaddi player?
He would have probably extended the raid for 1.5 minutes. Kailash, I mean, for the Pro Kabaddi League, instant replays was very important because after all, the viewer has to know what's going on for them to enjoy this film.
And I think the inclusion of instant replays also gives spectators and audience and people who are watching the complexity of things involved in kabaddi, right? During pandemic and during this Beyond the Mat, they would show the favorite plays of players. And the players are describing this, saying that, this is what I went in. This had happened before. This was my mindset. And this is what I did. And when you see it happen with the explanation, you realize how difficult things are and what kind of an athlete you have to be. You have to be fast. You have to be flexible. You have to be muscular.
And very swift in thinking.
Very swift in thinking.
In fact, I was hearing an interview by a kabaddi player and they said that it's your job to figure out who is the weakest link in the opponent. So, from outside you can't tell this, but the kabaddi player in that 30 seconds is quickly trying to figure out who is looking little scared, who's looking tense, who's the weakest link, and try and isolate and touch them and run. And all of this is happening in his mind, but somehow the commentator and the viewers have to be shown this drama that's going on.
Oh, yes. And, it has very similar things like the IPL. Glitz, glamour, Bollywood, Pro Kabaddi has it, right? Big business. Pro Kabaddi definitely is big business, because if you look at just the total purse during auctions, I think the first auction when 2014 when it happened, the total purse was around, I think, 60 lakhs or something. That was it. And 4 years later, I think 2018 or something, it had gone up to like 6-7 crores, right? So that's a meteoric rise, which means there is a lot of money which is involved. And which means Pro Kabaddi League was not just, hey, let me move this rural sport into television and make it big. It was an investment. So what would you think is the economics behind?
Yeah, so if we
Kabaddi?
Pull back and in the last episode on wrestling, we were also discussing that to make a good movie successful, you need a bunch of elements. So you need the producer. Here you said Charu Sharma is the producer. You need the financer, which you were saying Mahindra is the financer. You need the distributor, which is Star Sports. But there are two other very important elements. And I thought we can talk a bit about each. So we'll come to the hero, the most important. But you need an audience. And I think that's where the history of Kabaddi nicely fitted into the product. I thought I'll go and check up and see, when did Kabaddi start in India? When did it become a sport? And the one interesting thing that stood out is if you try to find a sport which is originally Indian, whose roots were in the subcontinent, Kabaddi is one of the very few sports, along with apparently chess and martial arts, which actually has a separate independent history in India. The complication is that what is Kabaddi now did not exist before the early 20th century. Sports require a set of rules. How do you win it? Homogeneous measurements about what should be the court size. But fascinatingly in India, you find different forms of games, very similar to Kabaddi across India. And I think this is very key, that Kabaddi existed both in South India and in North India. Maybe a slightly different forms of sports. Fundamentally, it was the same though, which is that you have two teams and a raider from one team has to go and either touch or have some kind of contact and try and come back. And it keeps going on and on till one team runs out of players. Why it was done is fascinating and I think requires a lot more research, which is that some people say that Kabaddi was training for martial, for fighting. So how do you sort of take on many enemies? Some people see Kabaddi as a way of mimicking the ritual of curbing a bull.
Okay.
Right? Where the raider kind of simulates the bull and the rest of them are as a group trying to sort of bring it down. Some people just see Kabaddi as part and parcel of agricultural life. So, every time the harvest ends, you have these, in many areas, and I remember in Karnataka, they have many shows of strength, of agility. After festival, and you have bullock cart races and wrestling, and Kabaddi is part and parcel of it. There was no national sport called Kabaddi. And in the early 20th century, some of the first Indian nationalists tried to make Kabaddi a Indian sport which is in contrast to other British sports like football, like wrestling, like boxing, which were very popular in India. Cricket also, though cricket was still also in its early days. And how they made Kabaddi a sport was, they created what is the modern version of Kabaddi, which is the rules that go with it, and tried to show it around. So no one actually played Kabaddi as a national sport. And there's this very fascinating story I found from this book, Nations That Play, by Ranajay Sen. And it says that in 1911, they did a demonstration of Kabaddi in the Badshahi Mela in Delhi. Okay. So it was a demonstration trying to build interest to audience. Very similar to what Pro Kabaddi League.
So it was a marketing pitch.
It was a marketing pitch. And Kabaddi was very strongly connected with Gymkhanas or Vyam culture in India.
Okay.
Right? So, you find many of these troops which practice Kabaddi and then demonstrate to get people interested. The turning point though was that in 1936, there was a very controversial Olympics in Berlin. And it was controversial because it was meant to serve the agenda of Hitler and Germany, of the superiority of the Aryan race. And this Indian group was invited to demonstrate it at the Olympics in the hopes that other countries will show interest. And they did a demonstration and they were also given some awards. It was called the Hanuman Vyayam Prasarak Mandal. And it's only in 1950 where a All India Kabaddi Federation was formed. And it took all the way till 1990 for Kabaddi to enter the Asian Games. But all throughout, Kabaddi is being played in villages across India. So the audience or the people who are interested in Kabaddi want to watch more already exists.
Right.
It's now the job of the filmmaker to make the movie reach them?
Yeah, I think this also was thought out by the people who are making Pro Kabaddi, because one thing which was common across was people in the marketing side and people who wanted to invest in Kabaddi realized that it was perfect for any kind of mass market brand.
And when you were telling me about, because I remember you said you were looking closely at who are the people who are sponsoring, who are the people who are advertising, and in Pro Kabaddi League you said there'll be like a local sports manufacturer, a cement company, a tractor company.
Oh yes.
And this sort of indicates to us that the advertiser, the sponsor, is targeting a very different audience. And I think that's the one place where the Pro Kabaddi League makes a lot of economic sense, because there's already an audience which knows the sport. It's spread out all across India. The franchises allow you to make brands specific to each culture.
Right.
So the Bengal team will have a slightly different slogan and slightly different, songs and slightly different sponsors. Then let's say the Punjab team, then the Tamil Nadu team. And you are finding guys or like advertisers who are maybe don't have a national presence. Maybe I'm a cement manufacturer who's very well known in Punjab, but how do I get to other states? So now Pro Kabaddi is providing a vehicle for other people to notice me, right? Both in terms of the brand, both in terms of the association of the brand with Kabaddi as a product, right? Which is about strength.
Right.
It's very masculine, it's very muscular. And I also found it fascinating that a lot of them were agricultural goods or goods based on agricultural life. Right? So if you think that Mahindra, why is Mahindra so invested in this? Mahindra is the largest tractor manufacturer in India, and rural India is potentially going to be the largest market in the world. So when you started talking about how Kabaddi League was an investment, this was what I feel was Mahindra's interest in it. Mahindra has enough money to go to cricket. He can go to football. He chooses Kabaddi because he realizes, wait, this is a giant market which no one has access to. I wanted to ask you one more thing, Kailash. So we have our audience and we have our financer and producer, but who are the actors?
Yeah, this is where the players come in. So one interesting thing is the actors who are coming for this are already trained actors, right? This is not the first time they're playing the sport. And remember, these are players who have played for either a state or the country itself, which means they have gotten training to play at a level which is of an Asian Games or Olympics. So you are getting a pool of well-trained, extremely good Kabaddi athletes, thanks to all the state support, now coming into PKL and showing their talent. But each of these players are also really interesting, and not just the national ones. Remember, PKL has international players, and we'll get to that. But even players who are from India are such diverse characters, right? For example, you have someone like Anup Kumar, who during the pandemic was part of the Haryana police. He's a police inspector. He is going around enforcing the lockdown, and PKL was also documenting it, saying that, hey, look, our player is doing service, right? And I found that very interesting, that these are not players, for example, you would not find cricket players doing that. Yeah. We have, I think, reached in cricket a level where even if, I remember Anil Kumble used to play for Indian Airlines or something. Yeah. I don't know if even cricket players play for state services as of now. But in Kabaddi, this is still happening, which means people have a different kind of connect with these athletes. They are not just on screen, but I think a lot of players did see the transformation, the kind of rags to riches story, which all of us again really like. Kabaddi gave that a lot. And what is also interesting is there are a lot of players from Iran, right? We talked about Iran already. PKL also has a lot of players from Iran. And one of them, Fazal Atrachali, I was just listening to a video where he was being interviewed, and the kind of things he told about where he comes from Iran. He comes from a small town, it's like a small village in Iran, and he has come to India, and he is going through the same kind of reactions. What people in India from small towns have come, right? So it's very interesting for me to see how two different countries, completely different ideologies, completely different systems of government, but the experience of Kabaddi players in Iran and in India, pretty much the same. Really good players waiting to play somewhere, lack of resources, looking for employment, and out comes one league, and suddenly you have all of them in the same plane. And the kind of advice which Fazal Atrachali was giving was slightly different, because he was also saying, when I go back to Iran, I tell Kabaddi players there, learn a bit of English so you can go to India and play. Right? See, it's not just the Kabaddi skills. There's a linguistic language portion to it, where in Iran, people are asked to learn English, not because it's a language, but there is a chance of you going to India.
Look at the irony in this. We learn English to go to America. And people are learning English to come to India.
Yeah, and that to play Kabaddi. So I think it's... So Pro Kabaddi, I think, really put Kabaddi on the world map.
So if you ask the question, why did it take a league for these sports to be popular? Right? That's the question I was asking myself. That these sports existed. They existed in the imagination, the cultures existed, audiences existed. They had tournaments. Why did it take for leagues to come in and really make them so big? And the answer for me was twofold, which is, one is that what is the difference between a league and the sport which exists? And the big difference is that a sport is a public good.
Yeah.
So Kabaddi, cricket, these are public goods. And a public good means it's meant to be for the enjoyment of the whole public, and anyone can participate in it. Which is why from independence, the government of India has set up a sports ministry whose job is to develop different sports. And, taxpayers' monies is invested in creating training facilities, is creating leagues, creating tournaments. Many public sector enterprises have actually created jobs for sportsmen. And it's part of developing sports in India. Sports in India is not meant to be a profit-making business. It's meant to just develop talent. What the league does is, it takes something which is a public good and privatizes it. That means that the money earned from that now goes to specific people. And how this happens is that Kabaddi is owned by the Indian government. The Kabaddi National Championship is controlled by the Indian government, regulated by the Indian Kabaddi Commission. The players are trained in facilities which the Indian government has made. The coaches are national level coaches. But now, when they go and play Pro Kabaddi leagues, the money that's made of that is not going back to the government. It's not going back reinvested into the games. It's going to those people who've invested in this cinema. So primarily, league is a way of taking something which is a public good and privatizing it and monetizing it. Because of Kabaddi's very unique history of being across India, of existing in different vernaculars, you suddenly have something which you don't have to convince people about this is a sport anymore. What you need to convince is that this version of it is something you want to watch. And, as an economist, I love sports. But to understand why something happens, you have to look at what's happening around. And many times, why something is successful or not has a lot to do not just with, let's say, the sport or the actor or the skill, but certain events that happen. And Pro Kabaddi is a fascinating story because its success is highly dependent on one completely contingent event that happens in India in around 2016. So, when I told you in the beginning, a league needs a broadcaster, right? That means someone who will show it, irrespective of if it's profitable or not. Star Sports entered, but the big change happening around 2014 was, before that, all sports were shown on television. And you needed a TV set, and you needed a set-top box, and you needed a cable operator. But around this time, all of these sports start moving on to streaming. And streaming is beautiful for the distributor because no more do you have to pay the cable guy, no more do you have to pay the set-top guy, no more does a person even need to buy a television. You've just jumped across all these technologies and directly giving it to people. It was great. The only problem was that India is a very poor nation and per capita income is very low, and most of the places where people watch Kabaddi, they can't afford the internet or they can't afford a screen to watch it on. The big change comes in 2016, where Reliance starts Jio services and they make the cheapest internet package in the world. And they start producing very cheap smartphones. So suddenly, in 1 year, anyone can actually afford to have a device and have an internet connection to watch the streaming. And for the distributors, from the number of cell phones and the data plans is expanding at such a fast pace that without doing anything, you're expanding your audience. The second interesting part to the story, which is contingent, is now Jio's come in, and you would think Jio's done everyone a favor, but Jio does the opposite. They start competing in the sports market. And the battle for sports in India begins in 2016, where who controls which sport controls the biggest audience. Because if you show an India cricket match, you've got essentially easily like anywhere from 25 to 30 million viewers at any point, right? If you get 25 million viewers, you can go to any sponsor and say, look, look at our guys I'm getting.
Yeah.
You give me money. Jio sets its sight on the number one sports in India, which is IPL. And by 2019, they've bought digital rights of IPL. 2023, they've bought complete rights of showing IPL, right? Across the internet. So Stars has lost its most important product, which is IPL and Indian cricket. So Star Sports is now looking around that how do we get our audience back? That's when Star Sports says, wait, we have this product, Pro Kabaddi League. It's upcoming. It has potential. Let's invest all our funds into it. And that's why after the lockdown, Star Sports starts making Kabaddi more and more crucial to its package. And the fascinating thing they do is, so if you take a subscription of a streaming site, these sites are fairly expensive for most Indians. But Star Sports starts providing the Kabaddi free. So you don't have to be actually a paid subscriber to watch Kabaddi.
Oh, okay.
And suddenly, after losing cricket, they're getting big numbers. And in recently there was a Ken article which showed that the Pro Kabaddi League in 2022 was the second largest watched sports event in India after IPL.
Oh, wow.
So Star Sports has to now invest in Kabaddi because that's the second biggest sports commodity that's around. And this actually really benefits the sport, which it was not guaranteed to be successful. We have so many other sports where Indians are doing well. We have Indian badminton players who are globally known. We have Indian athletes like Neeraj Chopra, globally known. Football, basketball, volleyball, India is upcoming. Here, Star Sports has to invest in a sport which is uniquely Indian, which has a very diverse base and which accidentally happens to have become a very successful product. So I felt it was the perfect marriage of interests, economic interests and sporting ability and culture that comes together.
Yeah, I think it's already partially done. The fact that players from Iran and all are coming, I think that part is starting. But remember at one point, NBA or NFL or any of these looked at American market as the only market, right? And then they realized, they need more. So they started moving across the globe. Pro Kabaddi League also will start expanding like that. The best example I can give is there are a lot of people, athletes from the American football college division who have finished college, but they have not gotten into NFL. Maybe because of a small injury, maybe because they are not, the selection is pretty tough there. So a lot of these players, these college division players, moved to Australia to play rugby because they had the same build, similar sports. So they moved. I have a feeling Kabaddi will also start attracting people like that. What I would like more than that is for the individual franchises, be it a Bangalore Bulls or Bengal Warriors, start putting the investment back in the local area. So Bangalore Bulls ask them to set up a training center where people from Karnataka can go and actually practice to professionally play Kabaddi. And I think that would be lovely. What do you see? How do you see the future?
Futures I can see for Kabaddi. So one is, it's counterintuitive. Can you guess which is the biggest watched team sport in the world is World Cup final? Okay. Can you guess what number 2 is?
I don't know. If I have to guess, I think the Cricket World Cup because India is watching it.
Yeah. So actually, for some reason, it turns out to be Super Bowl.
Oh,
NFL.
wow.
It's the second most watched event globally.
Okay.
Now, American football has come under a lot of controversy because it's been shown with fair degree of objectivity that there is serious concerns about injuries.
Yep.
Life-changing injuries, head injuries, right? And a lot of people have said that it's not a good sport for young upcoming. So one is we have so many athletes who are training for American football. And fundamentally, American football is like Kabaddi through many fields. Does, right? Because essentially you're just sort of pushing and shoving and working as a group. There's not so much ball manipulation. So I thought the athletes exist and the basic skill sets exist for them to start moving towards Kabaddi. 2, where's the money coming from? There's a huge diaspora market in India. And interestingly, that's where Bollywood makes its first money in the 80s and 90s, tapping this. I think there would be a lot of interest if, let's say, Kabaddi comes to Canada, US, England, places where there are huge diasporas from these areas where Kabaddi is popular, from Punjab, from Haryana, from Tamil Nadu, who are nostalgic for something very Indian. And these are like important. I mean, Indians have become important in business communities, political communities. They have the money, they have the market. And if Kabaddi becomes a global sport, the first market is this diaspora. And then, as you were saying, it builds up interest. It can become a more global game. I thought it's sort of poignant that there's a symmetry here. That in the early 20th century, Indians were demonstrating Kabaddi across the world to make Kabaddi a sport.
Yep.
And now they can go around the world and demonstrate to make Kabaddi a global sport.
And I think, so from now on, I think for our audience, we should say, let Sharma ji ka beta beti go for cricket. Tell your kids to start chanting Kabaddi, Kabaddi, Kabaddi. And I think they're going to be representing India or maybe even the world in the near future.
Hi, this is Narayan, and that's the end of this episode. But do you know that on Radio Azim Premji University, there's just a lot of good stuff happening? Whether it's Ghalib, whether it's history, whether it's Pani Puri, whether it's harmonium, whether it's the Bhakti Republic, whether it's cricket, whether it's science, whether it's mathematics, we've carried it all. You shouldn't miss this. Get subscribing.
You're listening to
आप सुन रहे हैं
You're listening to
ನೀವು ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ ರೇ ಕಥಾ ಸುನ್ ರೇಡಿಯೋ
Azim Premji
ಯೂನಿವರ್ಸಿಟಿ.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. This non-commercial program is for educational purposes only.